The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So we have seen the Caitlin Clark effect. Twice as many people watching the women's NCAA championship game as the men. Caitlin Clark outdrawing the other WNBA games 2-1 on television. She has had an enormous impact on women's sports. But it was 25 years ago today where we had a moment that may have been the biggest in the history of women's sports. Brandi Chastain scored the game-winning goal in the World Cup in front of 90,000 people at the Rose Bowl, and then took off her jersey in celebration, and we saw a sports bra that literally changed the image of women's sports forever. It's a remarkable story, and we'll get to it later this hour. But yeah, it was in fact 25 years ago today that we had that World Cup, and there was a lot of skepticism too about women's sports at that time. Oh, come on, you're going to have this at the Rose Bowl? It seats 100,000 people. What are you going to have, 10,000 people? That's going to be an embarrassment. No, it was a happening, and it was a huge happening. And what she did, not just in scoring the game-winning goal, but the celebration changed things in a big way. And I remember the picture was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, where she's waving her jersey over her head in the black sports bra. And my daughter, who was 10 going on 11 at the time, playing soccer, put that up in her room. She became an idol for millions and millions of young women and girls. And it launched some leagues that didn't succeed, but here we are 25 years later. And I think with teams like the DC Spirit and others that women's sports has taken a big leap. But it really had a big jump 25 years ago today. All right, let's get to some stupidity in college sports. And that is Mike Gundy, the longtime coach at Oklahoma State. Remember the famous soundbite when he was defending his quarterback and said, "Come at me, I'm a man, I'm 40. Okay, that was silly. Also, 4 years ago, when we were in the throes of the pandemic and they were talking about shutting down the college football season, he got up and he talked about how important he was to the economy of Oklahoma. And he was going to have his team practicing no matter what. He didn't care what kind of regulations were coming down the pipe. He was going to have his team ready to go. Well, as it turned out, we had part of a season. He did get his team on the field. And, you know, he's continued to have teams that are good. They played for the Big 12 championship this past year. But yesterday they had media day for the Big 12. And you know, they don't start for, another month and a half. But to get things hyped up for the college season, they invite reporters and have the coaches speak and that sort of thing. They held in Las Vegas. And recently he had a player, his star player, Ollie Gordon, who was arrested for DUI. And according to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, Gordon was pulled over for speeding, swerving through traffic lanes, and charged with DUI under the age of 21, transporting open alcohol containers, and failure to maintain his line, and driving over the speed limit. And maybe this addresses the way that college sports work now, because they are not student athletes and they are actually paid employees. So that you could look at it this way. I'm, of course, over the age of 21. But if I were to be arrested for DUI, I would not be suspended from this job. I would have to handle the legal responsibilities on my own. But I believe this station would let me continue to do my shows here. So that's where things have changed dramatically. But you are still the coach of a team. And when you talk about your star player in this way, you make an ass of yourself. And Mike Gundy has done it once again in discussing the arrest of his star player, Ollie Gordon.
So I looked it up on my phone. What would be the legal limit? Like in Oklahoma is 0.08 and Ollie was 0.1. So I looked it up and it was based on body weight. Not to get into the legal side of it, but I thought really 2 or 3 beers or 4. I'm not justifying what Ollie did. I'm telling you what decision I made. Well, I thought I'd probably done that 1,000 times in my life. And I, it's just fine. So I got lucky. People get lucky. Ollie made a decision that he wished he could have done better. But when I talked to Ollie, I told him, I said, you're lucky you got out light because you make a lot of money to play football.
Now, that's an important point at the end, and I'll get to more on that. But you don't get up there and say, well, I've probably done that 1,000 times. 3 or 4 beers, get behind the wheel. No, that's stupid. Then you're an idiot. Maybe you're a lucky idiot, but you're an idiot. And as still a group of young men that you are coaching, many of them under the age of 21, including Ollie Gordon, and the drinking age is 21. Never mind the DUI. He was underage drinking and driving a car. That's a pretty serious offense. And you sort of justify it by saying, yeah, okay, we've all done it. Have I done it? Yeah, I probably have. Not very often, and I'm not proud of it. And I got away with it. Thank God. I wouldn't do it again. But, yeah, in younger days, sure, I did that. And I didn't do it 1,000 times. And to say, well, I've done that 1,000 times, it's sort of like, hey, yeah, oh, well, okay. No harm, no foul here, right? I mean, that's really what he seems to be getting at. Now, when asked to explain this further, I don't think he did himself a lot of good. This is Gundy talking to ESPN after the foot and mouth incident in the press conference at the Big 12 Media Day.
First thing I said, would anybody get hurt? No. Well, you're lucky. He's very fortunate that
the values of the OSU football program. I'm committed to learning and growing from this mistake, and I will work to earn back the trust of those who I have disappointed. Thank you. Here's Coach Gundy earlier today with Pete Thamel.
Well, Ollie's very fortunate that he was able to get out of that situation without anybody getting injured, getting hurt. And when they called me the next day, I shared that with Ollie. First thing I said, would anybody get hurt? No. Well, you're lucky. You could have hurt somebody else, yourself, and then you deal with that the rest of your life. I have 3 boys, 29, 23, and 18, 19, and we worry about that all the time. And Ollie's going to play. And I share this with Ollie. I said, Ollie, we're in a time where you guys are essentially employees. You guys make lots of money to play this game. It's different than it was 5 years ago. And your punishment's going to be facing the facts. That's why we brought him here today. I said, you're not going into hiding. You're going to face the music. You're going to have to stand up and talk to people and answer questions. And hopefully, more than football, you can learn from the situation you've been in. Because if not, then we have a real issue. But he's going to play. And I'm going to do what we think is best for Oklahoma State football. And I think it's best for Ollie to play. If there's any punishment, it's make him carry the ball 50 times in the first game.
You're an idiot. That's really stupid to throw that in the end. If there's any punishment, I'm going to give him the ball 50 times. Well, he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. That's only going to help his numbers. It seems like you're bending over backwards to make sure that there's really no punishment here, and you're letting everybody know, well, he's an employee now, so we don't have to punish him. Again, this is a slippery slope I think you're going down, and it just makes you look like an idiot. But again, in this era of paying the players, I would agree that there's really, as an employee, I don't really know what you can do about that. They're probably paying him, he might be making over $1 million. I don't know. He's a great player. He's going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate. So I just look at Gundy, and it's just another episode in a long line of stupid things that he said, but winning trumps everything. And if you're a star player, in his case, that trumps everything as well. I imagine if this is a third-string safety and he gets arrested, they might want to make an example of him, maybe even cut him from the football team. We're not going to tolerate that. But you got a guy who ran for 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns and is probably going to be the focus of your offense. Yeah, okay, well, he gets paid, no punishment, and we might punish him har by giving him the ball 50 times a game. Ay. All right, let's get to the NFL, the continuing saga of Brandon Ayuik. And as time goes on, based on the history of this organization and what they're trying to run from now and trying to show people that it's not run the way it used to be, I have no doubt that if Dan Snyder owned the team, Brandon Ayuik would be a member of the team right now. They'd have traded anything 3 first-round draft picks, whatever it took. Just get him in here because the star quarterback and he are friends. Now, to Jaden Daniels' credit, you have not heard him say, gee, I'd really like to have Brandon Ayuik here. Good for him. He's pretty savvy. And that would be a bad look on his part. But Ayuik, every single day, doing something more and more foolish. The last incident, posting video of the Commanders' practice, he's making it clear he wants to come here and play with his old buddy, and I understand that, but that's not how you handle yourself as a professional. So the talks go on with the 49ers. They're not going to give him up, and they may give him a contract extension, but he's of great value this year at $14 million on a team that made the Super Bowl and would like to get back. But there is no contract extension. We're 2 weeks away from the start of training camp. That's still plenty of time to get something done, but it has not yet been done. And he's going to play, it looks like, if they don't work it out on the 5th-year option of his contract, and they could franchise him next year. I mean, the 49ers, don't have to give him up for a while. They could even franchise him 2 years in a row, though I don't know if they'd do that with a wide receiver, but that's an option for them. So this is Adam Schefter yesterday on Sportsmanlike with the situation with Ayuik and where the 49ers contract talks stand.
They've had conversations, and they've gone back and forth, and I think one of the issues there is that the wide receiver market has shifted in the midst of these conversations because the 49ers at one point were at a number I think that a lot of people would consider to be strong, fair, relevant. A deal didn't get done. The market rose. The Niners have wanted to keep him all along. That's been the plan. Even when other teams have approached them about trading for him, they have wanted to keep him. That has never been their idea to move on from him. They view him right now as important to that offense. The issue is, right now, unless they get that deal worked out, it would be the last year of his deal. So they're going to continue to try to get a deal done. They hadn't made much progress. The two sides met in person, was it 2 weeks ago or so? Do I think Brandon Ayuik would like to be traded? I think he'd be open to it. Do I think he'd want a new deal? Absolutely. Here's the issue. If you're Brandon Ayuik and you're scheduled to make what you're scheduled to make this year, the Niners have the ability to tag you after this year. Now, I don't know if they will. I don't know if they can afford to because they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy at the time they're paying some of these other players. And there are some contract decisions that they're going to have to make that they haven't had to make because they've had Purdy on the rookie contract. But, again, they have Ayuik under contract this year. They conceivably could tag him the next 2 years if they wanted. So there's a little bit of leverage there that the team has, but the player's a great player, and obviously there's going to be interest in his services, not only from San Francisco, but elsewhere if he hits the market.
My guess is there's going to be a lot of huffing and puffing. He's going to show up, and I think eventually they're going to work out an extension. Wide receivers have really been significantly upped in value in recent years. Now, I don't know if he's going to get top of the market, $35 million, but he's going to get paid. And the way he's going about it, I don't know if he's not listening to the advice of his agent or his agent is saying, yeah, go ahead and do what you want. But this is not the way it works. And if you want to come here, you might look at the star receiver here who is a complete mensch in Terry McLaurin and has never handled himself in any way like that. Yes, he did sit out the mandatory minicamp at the advice of his agent, but everything he's done on and off the field since he came here as a third-round pick in 2019 has been exemplary. And you might look at him and see how he handles himself, and maybe you, Brandon Ayuik, might think about handling yourself the same way. One other thing from Schefter, and this goes back to what Joe Burrow said on a podcast the other day, and it's not so much it's the discussion of 18 games, it's the way it's being discussed. So this was Evan Cohen talking to Schefter yesterday on Unsportsmanlike.
It was thrown out by Joe Burrow on Pardon My Take about an 18-game schedule for the NFL, but specifically the double bye, as well as Week 13, he suggested, as basically an all-star week like the NBA and Major League Baseball and NHL have. Is there anything to that? Is he just throwing that out there, or does he know something that the rest of us don't know?
No, I think he's just throwing that out there. I think he's putting on an idea that certainly is plausible, and it makes sense. And, football people know football, and Joe Burrow is a smart guy. So that would be his idea to propose to make the system interesting. And by the way, the league, I'm sure, is and should be listening to all these ideas and suggestions because they're all interesting and credible. But what I find maybe most interesting about that whole idea is the fact that we have a prominent player, one of the faces of the league, just openly talking about an 18-game schedule. And so this is now moving in a direction that the league absolutely wants it to move in. When I first heard that Joe Burrow was talking about an 18-game schedule, I was thinking, okay, well, he's going to be talking about what the players should be getting back on the 18-game schedule. If they're going to be going to 18 games, what do they get back? And then I saw it was this, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And it's an interesting idea. It's a great idea. I like it. If they get to 18 games, absolutely should be considered. But it was more interesting to me that you've got a face of a league just openly, I don't want to say in compliance with it, but thinking along those lines that, okay, well, if we go to 18 games, this is what it should look like. So if that's happening, it's just another sign to me that it's tracking that way, and it's only a matter of time before we get to 18 games.
Absolutely. And Schefter hit on the main point there. It's not so much that there's discussion of 18 games. It's Joe Burrow essentially saying it's a foregone conclusion. And remember, when they wanted to go to 17 games, DeMaurice Smith was head of the Players Association. And they all said, oh, no, we'll never accept 17. 17 games? You're kidding. Absolutely. Here's $1 billion. Shut up. We're going to 17. Okay, we're going to 17. And then, recently, Commissioner Roger Goodell said, yeah, we'd like to ideally have an 18-game schedule. The NFL always gets what it wants, and I think the players are starting to realize that now. They're going to reap the benefits of the money because they keep producing more and more cash off these games. They just took Christmas days, and, yeah, it's a Wednesday. We don't usually play on Wednesday, but the hell with it. We'll sell the 2 games to Netflix, make a lot of money. So what you have now is a group of players who have learned that doesn't matter how much we huff and puff. Eventually, the league is going to do what it wants to do. So here's Burrow saying, okay, well, if you're going to go to 18, let's have an all-star week. Well, I don't know if they're going to do that because they're going to want to have product on the air. In the fall and in the winter, you're going to want to have football games on the air. And there's going to be, if you don't, either they do it with their network partners or they farm it out to the others like they're doing now, to Peacock and Netflix and Amazon and other places. And maybe there's another spot they can sell the games. So you're seeing a shift in the thinking of the players. It used to be, they're not going to mess with us. And now, okay, well, that's what they want to do. Well, okay. And, they get extra money off it. So, that may shorten careers and so forth. But that's just the way it is. And the NFL, this is the big thing about that league versus especially the NBA. Stars move on. They don't care. They just make more stars. It's big name players retire, big name players get injured. They're fine. And it doesn't matter which teams play in the Super Bowl. It doesn't have to be big market teams. Last year, we had 2 smaller market teams play in the World Series, and basically nobody watched. Would it have been significantly greater if we had teams from New York and L.A.? Maybe, but not really. NFL, it's bulletproof, and this is, I guess, a sign of realization from the players. Yeah, we can fight it if we want, but eventually they're going to win. So let's just move forward with that, and it'll be an 18-game schedule. So be it. We'll make some more cash. Coming up, Caps have a new GM. He's actually an old face in the organization. We'll get to some of the reaction from the news conference yesterday. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
Now, from ESPN 630, your D.C. Sports Center.
We're here brought to you by NATCA, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. They bring you home safely. Redskins' name and logo aren't coming back, but the gold pants are. First time since 2018, which is the second to last year the Commanders were called the Redskins. Team says they're doing it because of feedback from the fans. They had stopped wearing the gold pants after the 1978 season, but brought them back in 2010. Baseball baseball, Nats and Mets continue their series in New York tonight. Last night, the Mets won 7-5, scoring 4 in the second off Jake Irvin, who's been their best pitcher. 1-8, Patrick Corbin starts tonight. And the Orioles continue to benefit from the Yankees' slump. New York's been the worst team in baseball since mid-June. They lost again last night, 5-3 in Tampa, keeping them 3 behind the Orioles, who were blasted by the Cubs 9-2 at Camden Yards. Game 2 of the series tonight. Coverage here begins at 6. DC weather, thunderstorm, high 97. Andy Pollin, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got Orioles preview today at 10:30, and Tony's got a show on this blistering hot Wednesday. I think Friday's supposed to be reasonable. It's going to be like in the mid-80s, and it'll feel like it's in the 60s. Yesterday was brutal. I saw on the dashboard of my car yesterday 103. Maybe the heat index, but it's still way too hot, as if I'm breaking news here. Interesting what's been going on with the Capitals and the Wizards under the ownership of Ted Leonsis. Because when Abe Pollin owned both teams, he kind of kept it in the family. He had tremendous loyalty to Wes Unseld, who's the greatest player in the history of the franchise as far as I'm concerned, and had almost a father-son relationship with Abe. This is how they would negotiate contracts every year when Wes was playing. Each of them would write a number on a piece of paper, and they would put it down on the desk, and usually Wes would take Abe's number. That's kind of how that worked. And played 13 years. He was, as a rookie, the MVP and Rookie of the Year, and helped to deliver the one championship that they won in 1978. In fact, he was the MVP of those finals. And so, he remained loyal to Wes to a fault. Wes was the coach. He was not a good coach. He made Wes the GM. Wes was not a good GM. And then, of course, Abe sold the Caps to Ted, and then after he passed away, Ted had the option to buy the Wizards, which he did. And who did he hire a couple of years ago as a head coach? Wes Unseld Jr. It was so much in the family with the Caps, too, when Abe owned the team, that during the 1989-90 season, which was the first year that they had made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, he fired Brian Murray during the season. Who did he replace him with? Terry Murray, his brother. Yeah. So there was a lot of this mishpucha stuff going on. So now Ted has been the owner of the Capitals now for 25 years. Actually, it was 25th anniversary yesterday when he assumed control of the team. Abe Pollin still owned the arena, still owned the Wizards, and Ted would have his option, and he had to take his lumps because the reason that at that time that Abe was selling the Cavs, they were losing money. They were, he wanted to offload that, so he did, and then Ted had the option to buy everything else, and so now. He has stayed with Dick Patrick as his partner. Dick Patrick is an investor in the team as well, and he's been with them all the way. And the new GM of the team is Dick Patrick's son, Chirs Patrick. Not that he's not deserving of this, not that he hasn't paid his dues. He's been in the organization in various roles, starting out as a scout like 16 years ago. He's recently been the GM of the Hershey team, which I believe won the championship. So he's had some success there. And he's not a kid. He's 48 years old. But, again, they keep it in the family. and I'm just, kind of curious because Ted always likes to talk about himself as a forward thinker, looking at the analytics, the numbers, likes to tell you how smart he is, how sports are changing, and he's on top of everything. But the way they're doing things, not that I'm being critical of this, because the Caps have been an incredibly successful organization under the ownership of Ted Leonsis. They may have underachieved in the playoffs a number of times, but they're in it all the time. And they're even in it this year in a rebuilding period. It's an odd thing that they're trying to do. They got to get Alex Ovechkin the goal-scoring record. It may take 2 more years, but in the meantime, you're trying to build a team that can kind of take the torch when Ovi retires and go into the future as a young and upcoming team, and a team that can sooner or later contend for a Stanley Cup. So yesterday they had the news conference to introduce Chirs Patrick as the GM. Brian McClellan, who has done it for the last 12 years, 15 years, whatever it is. Maybe it's only 10 years. That's right. But Brian McClellan is going to stay on as team president, and the day-to-day will be run by Chirs Patrick. This was Ted with the announcement yesterday that Chirs Patrick is getting this promotion.
25 years ago, Dick and I were signed a asset acquisition statement on this day 25 years ago. This was just given to me to close on buying the Washington Capitals, and it's been quite the ride, and I'm very, very grateful always to Dick for his leadership. And Dick's not only our chairman, Dick is my partner and is owner of the team. And Dick has done unbelievable job in building management, and our franchise really is one of the world-class operations in the entire NHL. You heard what Mac has done. Our previous general manager won a Stanley Cup, George McPhee with Las Vegas. The previous general manager just got inducted into the Hall of Fame. So we really have a lineage of excellence, and we intend to keep that going. And the real reason for this move right now is that sports teams and the NHL teams are becoming more and more complex to manage, and to have experience management continue with Dick Patrick as chairman, also an owner, having Mac now be president, and he runs and has final say on all hockey operations. And then to have Chirs do every job in the company and be able to move up now to be the general manager and deal with all the other general managers, I feel that the team is in great hands for the next 25 years. And we've had a great run for 25 years. We had a huge rebuild. And even with that rebuild, I saw a stat the other day that for those 25 years, we're tied for the most playoff appearances of any team in the league. And we have the third best record, most wins, most points. So these are big shoes to fill. We don't want to take steps back. We want to keep going. Our goal is over the next 25 years to win more Stanley Cups, and I think we have the right team to do it.
All right, now Brian McClellan, who's staying on again as team president, but he's kind of operated as a mentor to Chirs Patrick over the last decade or so, and he was asked, McClellan was yesterday, when did you know that Chirs Patrick is ready for this next step?
He's grown his skill set. I've been a big part of watching him grow, develop from being a scout to what he's been doing recently as managing Hershey, managing our pro staff. Has a great skill set, has really worked hard to develop it, has an all-around background in the game, and has made sure that he's, accumulated the skills, the experience to get to the point where he is today. And for me, I have a first-hand seat of, develop a friendship, a working relationship, so there's a lot of trust there. And he's been a big part of what we've accomplished over the last 10 years and the 10-plus years, too.
And he's not really been a typical hockey guy. Yes, he grew up in a hockey family. The Patrick family is like the Kennedys in politics. They've got, there's like 6 of them in the Hall of Fame, and they have a bunch of Stanley Cups and all that. But he actually went to UVA and got involved in the finance world and looked like he was going to have a career doing that, but the hockey itch got him, and he left that to become a scout. Now, that's a significant drop in pay, I'm sure, along with, you're leaving behind a career that could lead you to be a very wealthy man. But, he had the hockey itch, he wanted to do it, and when he came in as a scout, this was not exactly something that he was looking at down the line.
I never had this as an end goal when I first got back into the game. I just wanted to be involved with the team. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to try to help the Caps win a Stanley Cup. I don't know if Mac will remember this, but I remember coming down here when he was interim GM and went out for a drink, and we were talking about what's going to happen next. And I was talking to Mac about his ability and want to do the job, and he said to me, do you ever think about doing something like this? And I said, yeah, I'm not ready now. And but maybe someday. And I feel like over the 10 years that Mac's been involved, I've definitely gotten to the point where I feel 100% ready to jump into it and get going. So I guess it's kind of evolved over time.
Yeah. Now, what he's going to do here, we've talked about this is an odd rebuild in that you have Alex Ovechkin. And look, it would be great for the whole organization if he tops the record this year, tops Gretzky. I think he needs 43 to do it. He came close to that this year. Can he do it in 1 year? Who knows? It might take 2. You certainly don't want it to take 3. He's not going to – not that you want to push him out the door because he's been the greatest team sport athlete of this generation. I'll still stick with Walter Johnson and Sammy Baugh as the greatest DC athletes. Johnson maybe the greatest right-handed pitcher in the history of the game, and Sammy Baugh, when they named the top football player of the first half of the 20th century, he was the greatest professional player. And he had a 16-year career and was at the time, he was the best. He was Patrick Mahomes of his era, let's put it that way, or even the Tom Brady of the era, even though he didn't win 7 championships. But in this era, in the later half of the 20th century and into the 21st century, Alex Ovechkin is the greatest DC team sport athlete. So how do you satisfy the need to get him those goals and also be continuing to build a team that's going to compete down the line for a Stanley Cup? Here's Patrick.
The team will dictate a lot of it, but I mean, I think we've made a statement already with what we've done in this offseason. It's easy for people to say your superstars are aging, it's time to rebuild, blow it up, do it all over again. I think in actuality that can be a lot harder than it sounds, and I think you've seen a lot of teams try it and kind of get stuck in an endless cycle of tearing down and building up and tearing down and building up and never getting to where they want to be. And I think you can also look at some teams that have not done that and had success. I think if you look at the conference finals this year, you'll see some teams that were able to transition from an older core to a younger team that's competitive. So I think that is definitely on the table for us. Again, the moves that we made this offseason, some of the young players that we had just finished, their first full pro year with Washington. Another group of young players that just won a Calder Cup, some of them for a second time in Hershey. And then 2, what I think are really good drafts for us. I think we positioned ourselves to be able to pivot either way if we want, but my intention is to be competitive. I'm not a guy that likes losing, and I truly believe that we can transition, for lack of a better term, past the Ovechkin era with a competitive team.
Here's a stat I was looking for. When the Capitals won the Cup in 2018, Chris and Dick Patrick became the 6th and 7th members of the Patrick family to have their names engraved in the Stanley Cup. So having a person with the last name of Patrick associated with your hockey team probably is not a bad idea. And look, Ted doesn't fire people. He's fired some coaches and he's fired some general managers, but he usually lets them run to the end of their contract. Doesn't like paying out dead money, and so look at his record of stability. He had George McPhee, who he inherited, kept him until 10 years ago. McPhee, obviously a very good GM, went to Vegas and won the Cup there. And then Dick Patrick for the last, Brian McClellan for the last 10 years. And now Chris Patrick, who's 48 years old and could conceivably be there for 20 or more years if he has some success. So, a lot of things I criticize Ted for, but I think that the ability to be patient with his management people, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Brandi Chastain, on this day 25 years ago, changed women's sports forever. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock, also 10:30. We do Orioles preview every Wednesday. We'll talk to the Orioles hitting coach, Ryan Fuller. Hitting, not great last night. Pitching, terrible. But they are really benefiting from the Yankees, who have incredibly been the worst team in baseball since mid-June. They were first the best team in baseball to that point. And now they've been the worst team in baseball. It's remarkable. They've lost 17 of their last 23 games, lost again last night in Tampa, and we'll get to that coming up at 10:30. Meantime, we look back 25 years ago today when Brandi Chastain made a move that will never be forgotten. it wasn't that she scored the winning goal in the World Cup, although that was significant. It was how she celebrated. And, you know, you think it's now been over 50 years since the Helen Reddy hit I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. This was really symbolic of that. I know it's many years later, but it really was a huge step up for women's sports. She celebrated, as they say, organically. She didn't plan this out. She took off her jersey, twirled it over her head, and all she was wearing was a sports bra underneath. Men have taken off their jerseys many times to celebrate goals, championships, whatever. Dennis Rodman always used to take his jersey off after the game and throw it in the stands. I mean, it's a male move, but this was Woman, Hear Me Roar, and it was such a significant moment for women's sports, not just because of what she did to win the World Cup, but because of the game itself. Now, this was a period of time where people were skeptical as to how many people would be interested in something like this. Soccer didn't become a part of the Olympics until 3 years earlier, 1996, in Atlanta, and it picked up some momentum from that. But the plan from FIFA, the governing body for soccer for the 1999 Women's World Cup, was to play it in 10,000-seat stadiums, including some college and high school stadiums and parks, feeling like, gee, if we put it in a place like the Rose Bowl that seats 100,000 people and we get 9,000 people, it's going to look terrible. If we have it in a school or a college, whatever, that seats 10,000 and we get 8,000, well, it looks almost full. But things began to change off those Olympics. And Marla Messing, who was the CEO and president of the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup, knew that there would be interest. And she started to see this when the national soccer team in the Olympic semifinals and finals at Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia, they drew 140,000 for the two games, 70,000 apiece. And people were starting to wear jerseys, particularly young women, that had Mia Hamm and Tiffany Milbert and their name and number on the back. And they said, okay, things are picking up. What happens if we put it in the Rose Bowl and we put tarp over the upper part of the stadium? Just have the lower part of the Rose Bowl. And as they got closer to the game, tickets were selling. And they said, the heck with that. So they had 90,000 people for the final against China on this day in 1999. They also had an estimated 40 million people watching this on TV. 40 million people. That's what a really good Thanksgiving game that involves the Cowboys will get now. That's incredible. And that was during the cable era. It wasn't like a time when we had like 3 channels. This was 1999. We were well into the cable era. And this was a women's sports event at a 90,000-seat stadium, a 100,000-seat stadium that was nearly full to watch women play soccer. And it was a scoreless game. It almost was a win for China. 10 minutes into extra time, they played extra time before the shootout, Christine Lilly made an unbelievable save. Brianna Scurry was the goaltender, but she was out of the goal, and Lilly stopped the shot by heading the ball off at the 6-yard line, and then Brandi Chastain cleared it. Now, Chastain was a defensive player, not really a goal scorer. And before the game, before the shootout, they got to the shootout, the coach, Tony DeCiccio, told her to take the penalty kick with her left foot. She'd never done that in a game before. And then he just took off, like put that in her head. It seemed absurd, but she was thinking, okay, maybe I'm going to do that. So, again, she is the 5th kicker in this as they go back and forth on penalty kicks. And if she makes the goal, the U.S. wins the game. This is part of a Fox Sports special looking back on this day 25 years ago at the Rose Bowl.
I think once, placing that ball down, stepping back, hearing the same thing over and over in my head, don't look at the goalkeeper, don't look at the goalkeeper. And knowing that, I had a chance to win the World Cup was probably the least thing from my head. Go! As soon as that kick left my foot, and it felt like forever, and I see it going into the goal, and honestly I feel like the ball's not turning, it's not spinning, it's just heading towards the goal, and then it hits the net. And literally, it was chaos. It was insanity. Obviously, the picture of the sports bra itself, not a thought went through my head. Did you think about it before? Absolutely not. I played in the back line. My job was to keep the ball out of our own net, not to score a World Cup winning goal. And so you're free to just enjoy it and experience it in this organic, really genuine way, and to get to do it with your best friends and the people that you admire greatly, just put everything over the top.
What a day this was, and it continues from the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. The United States has won the Women's World Cup.
There were so many people at the Rose Bowl that day, they ran out of water. It was blazing hot. Maybe not as hot as it is today, but it was hot. President Clinton was there to congratulate them after it was over. It was just a remarkable, remarkable day. Now, what followed is not exactly what they hoped for. Because of the success of this, they said, well, let's try and launch a women's league. I think they tried them in the past before, hadn't worked out, but we had a team in Washington, and Mia Hamm was a part of it. And for the first game, they drew 35,000 people. But as the season wore on, the fan base dissipated, and when you had 4,000 people at RFK Stadium, it really wasn't a good look, and the league folded up. I think they lasted 2 years, maybe 3 years, but it did not continue. And it has since relaunched, and it looks like what we have now is going to be successful. We didn't have a stadium like Audi Field. I think that would have been a big help for them. It's a much different thing, even though you wouldn't have gotten everybody in a 20,000-seat stadium for the opener. 20,000 is the right size to play soccer, and we've had a couple of sellouts as well. With the Spirit. So, and we have the games here on ESPN630DC.com with Bram Weinstein doing the games. Also, the immediate fallout from the celebration. Again, she was on the cover of Sports Illustrated with the shirt waving above her head and the sports bra and the whole thing. And young girls really gravitated to that. I told you my daughter took the Sports Illustrated cover and put it up in her room. She played girls soccer at the time, and as did a lot of her friends. And it was a very, very uplifting thing for not just girls sports, but for all sports. For what happened, it just did not have the ability to sustain long term. And you also look at the WNBA and the run up to Caitlin Clark. That's been a money loser for 25 years. So what she's doing now is she's taking it to another level. And I think women's soccer has found its footing as well with the women's soccer league that we have now, and also the great success that the women's teams have had in World Cup competition. But it really got off the ground 25 years ago today with the Brandi Chastain goal and the great celebration that followed. Anyway, next hour, a lot of talk about Cooper Flagg. And, this is kind of similar to what it was 2 years ago, where you started hearing maybe even earlier than this about Victor Wembanyama. He was a year older. Cooper Flagg is 17 years old. He doesn't turn 18 until December. He has yet to play a single college basketball game. But right now, he's the talk of the basketball world. He might be the great white hope. He's a white guy going to Duke who could be a generational player in the NBA, and it's got a lot of people excited about this. He was on display against the Olympic team the other day, and a lot of reaction to that, including what Tony and Mike said about it last night on PTI. We'll get to that, plus Orioles preview in the next hour as well. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
It's not often these days that we're unfamiliar with a player, even at the high school level, who may or may not be a phenom. Like, we knew all about LeBron James when he was coming out of high school 20 years ago, 21 years ago. Wow. We knew about him because he'd been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. A number of his games had been on TV. Most people had seen some of his games. Got a guy named Cooper Flagg who's creating a lot of attention. And there may have been some of his games on TV, but they haven't gotten the attention that LeBron got while he was in high school. And he, off what he did the other day against the U.S. Olympic team, has created a sensation that I don't think we've seen in a long time. Now, we had, the Victor Wembanyama thing last year, where people were talking about him throughout the season and who was going to get him. And then, of course, he went to the Spurs, and people said, oh, that figures. They always get that kind of luck. When they had David Robinson, they got Tim Duncan. And Greg Popovich, who I think is in his mid-70s, signed up for 5 more years to coach him. I mean, we knew about Wembanyama, though I don't think a lot of people had seen him play. But now we've got Cooper Flagg, who was on the radar. I mean, we'd heard his name for a while, but it's gone to another level because in what they call the select team game, where they played like a scrimmage against the Olympic team the other day, he was, at least from the highlights, sensational, and from all accounts, more than held his own as a 17-year-old. Joe Varden covers the Olympics and other things for The Athletic and is in Vegas covering the U.S. Olympic team getting ready to play. And he was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday explaining the phenomenon that is Cooper Flagg and how he wound up on the select team in the first place.
There's a number of, connections, of course, between Team USA basketball's program and Duke. And chief among them is Grant Hill, one of the greatest college players of all time, who's now the managing director there. But also, Sean Ford, who's been sort of running USA basketball for decades, and has a very keen eye for talent and for keeping the pipeline, flowing. Given Cooper's credentials as National Player of the Year, but also like he was already in the USA pipeline, playing for the U17 team 2 years ago that won gold at the World Cup. And so you put all that together and he gets the invite. Cooper was surprised to get the invite. He's the first college player to do anything at a USA national team camp since Marcus Smart and Dougie McDermott in 2013. But he's so young. I mean, he's 17. He's like one of the youngest players ever to do this. So it was a surprise, but I mean, obviously it turned out pretty well.
How good was he yesterday?
So, okay. He was really fun to watch. He hit 2 threes while we were watching. He had an awesome putback over the USA defense. Davis was on the floor at the time that it happened. He was in passing lanes. Drew Holiday had to guard him, and I know that Drew is only 6'3", whereas Cooper is 6'9"ish. But Drew is he's one of the best defenders in the NBA, so that really kind of speaks to what everybody thought of Cooper. But the reason why I flinched is you are still talking about a USA team that is ramping up. And I never thought in watching that scrimmage yesterday that the USA guys were playing at full tilt, whereas Cooper seemed like he was moving pretty quickly. So, I want to temper it a little bit, but the reaction from all the other select guys and the select coaches, and then even some of the NBA guys on Team USA, spoke very, very highly of Cooper. And I guess you could see, I hadn't seen very much of him. And so I walked away from the gym yesterday saying, oh, I get it. I understand why he's the presumptive number 1 pick in 2025.
But this reminds me of the Dream Team. When the Dream Team got roughed up, that first scrimmage with college players, Mashburn was there, and I think Hurley was there. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, you guys are playing really serious here. Is there going to be payback for Cooper Flagg? Are they playing any more games against each other?
I'm glad you brought that up. You know who else was on that team was Grant Hill. He was on the select team. So it kind of comes full circle. There will be no brushback, no chin music today as the select guys have been sent home. Today is a walkthrough, some light shooting to get ready for Canada. However, there was a little bit of payback, but it was Cooper. In the team scrimmage on, today's Tuesday, so this would have been Sunday. Pretty good game going. And I guess Cooper pulled up for a 3 and Davis got out to the perimeter and blocked it. And I guess he sent it into the wall. pretty good block. And so then yesterday he comes down, same situation. Davis tries to get out there and he's late, and Cooper splashes it in the corner. So that was a moment that a lot of guys were talking about.
So that's Joe Varden of The Athletic. What Dan Patrick is referencing is that there was a scrimmage between the Dream Team, the real Dream Team, 1992, and a group of college players that included Danny Hurley and Grant Hill and some other great players. And they lost the game. And the Olympic guys were like, well, yeah, Jordan didn't play much. And the college guys, the select team, they were like, yeah, we were really hot that day. We were really doing our thing. This is really well chronicled in the Dream Team documentary that was done by Jack McCallum. And Mike Krzyzewski was an assistant on that team. And Chuck Daly was the head coach, the coach of the Bad Boy Pistons. And Krzyzewski says Chuck threw the game. He wanted the players to realize they could lose. Now, they made a mockery of playing in the Olympics. That's the most dominant performance that anyone has ever seen. But he kept Jordan out for most of the game because he knew even if he told Jordan not to try, Jordan was going to try. So he didn't play him. And, did it in a way that he kind of engineered a loss for the U.S. That's an important point on that. And then the following day, they just obliterated the select team. They just went to town on them. So there's that. This is Vincent Goodwill, who works for Yahoo, also covering. He is African-American, a little maybe different perspective on this. He says in the conversation with Dan Patrick that he hates Duke and everything they represent, but did say this about observing Cooper Flagg.
Not to make this bigger than what it is, but can you remember the last white American-born basketball player to go into college with hype train and then come into the NBA and exceed the hype? Because that, to me, goes back to Larry Bird, and I feel like it's been too long. Maybe Cooper Flagg is the next one.
Well, Bird didn't have the same kind of fanfare going to Indiana because Indiana was loaded back then at the time. He went there and he was overwhelmed. I mean, they had Buckner and, they had all those great players, great teams. And then Bird, decided to work on a garbage truck and then went to Indiana State. It was the hype after that going into the NBA. But we're talking about 17 going into college. I mean, he could go to the NBA. He would have been the first pick in the NBA draft this year, I'm guessing, by all accounts.
Yeah. I mean, look, I can't remember the last time that we've had a consensus after a bad draft. We're going to have a historic draft with the number one pick, and teams are already setting themselves up. Like Danny Ainge in Utah right now is salivating at the prospect of getting Cooper Flagg in Salt Lake City.
Okay, but what are the players saying about him? The NBA players, the Olympians.
Well, I think they knew. Like, it's one thing to know a guy, you got to think about the Nike Hoop Summits and the AAU circuits that these guys have been playing on. He sort of shot up like a rocket over the past year and a half, where John Shire, like this kid is from Maine. He's not from necessarily the easiest part of America to get to. But once Duke coach John Shire got to him and you got to see him on the AAU circuits, everybody gets to see. Remember, LeBron has an AAU team. All these other guys have AAU teams that they cultivate themselves. So yesterday, I think you got to see, like, there was this one sequence, Dan. He walked down Anthony Davis for a three, and then they tried to lob it ahead to AD. He broke that up. And somehow, in one fell swoop, someone shot a three, and he streaked down the court. This isn't sneaky athleticism. He is an athlete. He streaked down the court with a tip in over Bam and getting a foul at the same time. Like, those are pro plays for a guy who was 17 years old. Like, those guys were raving about him. I think there's a point where someone like that, if he shows up to the U.S. select team, you're trying to see if he belongs. You're trying to see how he fits. And then after day one, I think they're like, oh, okay, he belongs on the same floor of us. And yesterday was the day that he really asserted himself.
Okay, so we've got another perspective in the studio besides my middle-aged white guy look. Ijakum Harris, a former college basketball player, African-American, has watched and played the sport for a long time. What do you make of this Cooper Flagg hype?
Andy, I think he's just legit. He's an athlete, 6'9". He plays hard,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that's where the hype is coming from because he just plays so hard at that level, and especially now with the way everything's going with how high school players like to take plays off. he's legit.
Do you think that there's a rush for white people to want to embrace, like he just said, like we just heard there from Goodwill, that there has not been a white American player who has gone into college hyped and then come out as a consensus number one? I don't think, maybe I have to go back to like Bill Walton for something like that, Yeah. Do you think we're reaching a little bit too much?
In a sense, yes, I believe we're reaching, but I feel like it's the nature of the fan.
Yeah.
Of we want to find someone that we can relate to, and not every white American can relate to LeBron James or Stephen Curry, but they may feel some type of relation to Cooper.
Well,
so yeah,
and I think at this point, the way the NBA has evolved, it's kind of a curiosity. I mean, since Larry Bird, I don't think we've had a player that we could argue who's a white American is the best player in the game.
No, we can't, because even some of the guys that were hyped, such as like the Tyler Hansbroughs and the JJ Redicks, they didn't live up to to the professional hype that Cooper is getting right now.
Yeah, no, those guys were really good college players. Well, look at the Dream Team, right? I mean, the one college player that they have is white, and he has a so-so NBA career, right? So yeah, there's Christian Laettner was one of the 10 best college players ever. I think you could say that. Yep. Yeah, and so he came in and he was, that was part of the way they assembled that team to kind of tie it to the past. Okay, we'll take one college guy. Well, that was the one college guy that they selected, and he was a white American player who turned out in the NBA to be just okay. So yeah, it's a very interesting phenomenon. Here's the older view, both black and white. Tony and Mike on PTI last night, taking a look at this Cooper Flagg phenomenon.
Well, I've heard the hype over Cooper Flagg. I live with a 16-year-old high school AAU basketball player who been raving about Cooper Flagg. I heard about Cooper Flagg in my house for like 2 or 3 years, and I've expressed the customary skepticism. And I did this to Kendrick Perkins one day, who isn't impressed by anything, right? Overly so. And I said, Perk, you believe this Cooper Flagg nonsense? And he goes, listen to me. I've seen this kid play. This kid is the deal. I'm like, what? This is you, Kendrick Perkins. What are you saying? And if everyone you talk to says this, so I'm willing to listen, except I heard the same stuff about Bobby Hurley after he lit up a team in 1992 that was a real dream team, the only one. And how'd that turn out for him in the pros? It didn't turn out at all. So excuse my skepticism.
He was in a car accident, Mike.
Tony,
he was in a car accident.
Even before that, it wasn't going to be great.
Bobby Hurley in Dream Team, there was the same kind of scrimmage. And the college kids did great.
Yeah.
And Bobby Hurley was singled out as having done very, very, very great.
Yeah.
And the next day, the Dream Team got angry because this was leaked out there and they held. Yeah, they had no points. But I still remember, and you still remember, Bobby Hurley 32 years later, and I think people will remember Cooper Flagg as a result of this. Look, he was the #1 recruit, as your son told you. And it's a big deal that he's going to Duke. But let's get to the real facts of this, okay? Because he's going to Duke and because he is a white player, assumptions are going to be made. Statements are going to be thrown out there. That is the nature of what we're dealing with here, as it is with Caitlin Clark. I hope he is a great player, but the pressure on him will be enormous. You and I talk about this on air and off air. Will there be a great white American basketball player again, sort of like Larry Bird? And if there is, will he be allowed to just be a basketball player, or will all these cultural notions overwhelm him?
At first. Right. And the question, I hope this kid has the stomach for this, Tone, with parents who can help and teammates who can help. But, Tony, this is a real thing. People don't really want to get into it with Caitlin Clark. This is new. It is newer to women's sports. But there won't be that same reluctance and reticence when it comes to Cooper Flagg and Duke. And by the way, this U.S. team, we'll get to that later on in the summer because you and I will pay real attention to them then. I don't know about them. I think they'll win.
We'll see.
I don't know about them. I don't know what this means.
I'll get to that in a second. But in terms of the black and the white contrast here, you do have, he's French, but he's black. Wembanyama, he could turn out to be a superstar. Flagg comes in, white American. Is it the same as Bird and Magic? No, it's not. And we had familiarity with them because they had played together in one of the most, well, it was not a good game, but it was the most watched final we ever had in terms of ratings with the final between Indiana State and Michigan State. So we ushered them in off of that, and it was the perfect storm. You had the white guy playing in the blue-collar Boston town, and you had the flashy and charismatic Magic Johnson playing in Los Angeles, Showtime. And the fact that, we didn't really – if they were in the same conference, I don't think it would have been as good. Now, they only played against each other – well, I would say only, but they played against each other 3 times in the finals. And that's what really ignited the NBA. That was the two of them. It's a little bit different if you look at Wembanyama being from France and Cooper Flagg being an American from Maine, but it does have that potential. And as far as what Wilbon says about, yes, we could lose, think about it this way, that the teams that they're talking about now are Canada and France as being the biggest threat to the U.S. When we had the Dream Team 32 years ago, there was no threat. There was no team that was going to give them a challenge. Some of these games were absolute laughers, but they also allowed the great players to display their incredible skills. And many believe it's the greatest team ever put together, and there'll never be anything like it. It may be, but this is how world basketball has evolved. This is Joe Vardon of The Athletic talking to Dan Patrick about this team and how good it is. And in one way, if you look at it, they're better than the Dream Team.
If you want to use the word talent, or if you want to use resume, this team has more has more than the Dream Team, because you have to think about if you want to say Michael's here and LeBron's here, fine, but the greatest, most decorated player in U.S. history is Kevin Durant. He's on this team. And then you add in Steph Curry, who's the greatest shooter of all time, one of the greatest players of all time. He's on this team. There are 11 current All-Stars, and I believe all 12 of these guys have been All-Stars at some point, but 11 of them were on the All-Star team last year. Like that has I don't believe that has ever happened. And then, the Dream Team had a college player. This team does not. So, I guess the thing that sort of evens this out a little bit is this team is older, right? LeBron is 39, Durant is upper 30s, same with Steph, Kawhi Leonard, same thing. So maybe some of those guys might be slightly past their primes, whereas as Michael and company they were still in their prime. But I think this team is actually the more impressive roster.
That's amazing, but he may be right. But the fact that, and Wilbon's right too, that they are not necessarily going to win this thing. I mean, we should, but here's Joe Vardon, who covers the NBA and covers the Olympic team here, and he's saying if you match up these rosters, this one might be better, which is hard to get your head around because there are things to look at, like when Larry Bird played on that team. Okay, his back was so bad that he had to lay down on the floor. He couldn't even sit in a chair. He was clearly compromised. Magic had missed that season. That was the season where he announced that he had the HIV virus. Now, he did come back and play in the All-Star game, but he wasn't Magic. It was Michael Jordan in his prime. And if you want to make that comp, however you feel about the Jordan-LeBron debate, it's Jordan in his absolute prime in 1992, which would have made him, about 30 years old, versus LeBron, who's 39. And LeBron is still a great player, but he's not in his prime right now. So there's that. Same with Durant. Durant's in his mid-30s right now, not the same player that he was. But the fact that you could make a case that this team is more talented than the Dream Team, which is the most celebrated basketball team of all time, the greatest collection of talent we've ever seen, and they're maybe in the mix to win, but not necessarily an overwhelming favorite. We may be slight favorites, but not much. And if you look at many of the great players who've come into the NBA in recent years, they're Canadian, Canada, and France. And, France is bringing in more. The Wizards at the top of the draft have taken players from France the last 2 years. This is where the talent is being developed. And It was the Dream Team that introduced the game 32 years ago. I mean, Joakim Noah, his father, Yannick Noah, was a great tennis player. And there's some pictures of him sitting in the stands watching this. And he grew up in a tennis family. Now, he was tall. He's 6'10", but, there's 6'10" tennis players. Maybe if there's no Dream Team that comes along, he winds up playing tennis like his dad. But he was introduced to the game. A lot of young foreign kids saw it for the first time and saw how incredible it was, and they wanted to do it. And it has changed the world for basketball in an incredible way. So it just is mind-blowing if you remember that 92 team and how dominant they were and how easy it was to win these games, and they became, kind of rock stars. And if you haven't seen the Jack McCallum documentary, which got to be 20 years old, watch it. It's great because he outlines all of this stuff. But the fact that we have a team now where an argument can be made that they're better and just maybe they'll be good enough to win the whole thing. That has really shows you how basketball has grown globally over the past 30 years. All right, coming up, we'll get to Orioles preview. Ryan Fuller will join us. He's the Orioles hitting coach, and he's got an interesting backstory. Here's a guy who was a high school teacher not that many years ago, and now is in the major leagues with a team that could win the World Series. We'll get to that and more as we continue Orioles preview on the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
And we continue with Orioles preview. Orioles last night took it on the chin from the Cubs. 9-2 was the final last night. And Dean Kramer, who had been on the injured list, came off it last week against Seattle, was terrific with 5 scoreless innings, got lit up last night. He lasted only 4, gave up 7 runs, 5 of them earned. He also walked 3 and gave up 7 hits in the 4 innings he pitched. And like he says, when it's not your night, it's not your night.
I got a few more swings and misses last start, and it's easier to pitch when you're swinging. Hey, we're getting swings and misses. These guys are a good contact team, and they got a piece of just about everything.
Do you feel like command was probably the biggest issue for tonight?
No. I thought I threw the ball. I was in and around the zone, and they just put some swings on some decent pitches.
What was your reaction to finding out that Westberg was added to the All-Star team?
I mean, everybody in this clubhouse is happy for him. He's well-deserving and incredibly hard worker, and we're very excited for him.
Yeah.
He deserves it.
Yeah, that's the thing to do. Change the subject, and change the subject to Jordan Westberg, who before the game was named as a backup on the All-Star team. He replaces Rafael Devers, Boston, who is not going to play. And so this is how this is all unfolded. Before the game, Brandon Hyde, the manager, knows that Westberg is going to be in the All-Star game, but he's not allowed to say that Westberg is going to go in the All-Star game, so he does a lot of dancing around the questions.
He literally does everything right. The way he prepares, the way he plays. We just had a hitters meeting, and I thought it was awesome. Our hitting guys recognized this. We're down 12-0 in the 4th. Mountie hits a base hit. Jordan's at first base. Mountie hits a base hit to right field. Westy goes first to third. Now, that sets up Austin Hayes for a sac fly. It's an RBI for a teammate. That sets up the bottom part of the order to have guys on base. It just epitomizes, honestly, who he is. He just plays the right way, so hard, prepares incredibly well. He just does everything right. And so, obviously, the way he's handling the media, he's doing that great job at that as well. He's just very, very professional and really, really good player. And so, I'm so fortunate to have the opportunity to manage him as well as so many other guys in there. Parents did an unbelievable job and comes from a great family, and he is just an incredible worker. And, I wasn't with him along the way, but I noticed, it's really easy to notice right away how hard this guy works, and he's the first in the clubhouse, and he's in the weight room constantly, and he takes his profession extremely seriously, and he really wants to win. I think his routine, probably major league routine, has gotten better as he's kind of understood what the big leagues is like. But he just does everything right.
So nothing but flowers, but he can't really say what's going on. So then comes to the post game, and now it's out that Westberg is going to the All-Star game, and this is Hyde again.
When did you find out that Westberg was?
Before I answered the 5 questions in here, why he didn't make the team, which was putting me in a super awkward spot. I tried to do the best I could. But no, I just celebrated with him right before. It was actually right after you guys were interviewing him in the why he didn't make the team. And then I had to go answer why he didn't make the team when I knew he made the team. So it was, I'm happy he made the team.
Was his reaction as we would expect, like pretty stoic?
No, not stoic. I think it's as happy as, I don't think he gets real excited. I mean, but he was very, very happy, and he was looking forward to calling people back at home and telling them. So it was a great moment.
Can we still trust you when you tell us stuff?
Well, I can't. When I'm under order to not ever say anything until something's announced, it's an awkward situation to be in. So that was one of those.
Yeah, he's not a good liar, which is a good thing, I think. So that's Brandon Hyde. Corbin Burns will start tonight. He is going to the All-Star game, may even start. He's 9-3 with a 2.32 ERA. This is his reaction to going now for the 4th straight year.
It's been a little crazy. Going back to really February, it's kind of been a whirlwind this year, but I'm excited to be a part of another All-Star game. Honored to represent the Orioles in the American League, but it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time of the year to join the teammates that have already been elected to the All-Star game. To join them is pretty special, but just looking forward for another fun week. If I'm given the chance to start, that'd be great. Obviously, never done it before. Not very many guys get the opportunity to start an All-Star game, so that'd be really cool. And then to have Adley back there would make it even better. I never expect to be an All-Star. You never expect to put up good results. For me, it's going out and putting my work in to try to do the best I can. I know I've got a pretty good process and I've got stuff to do it. So it's just a matter of going out and executing every time I go out there. And fortunately enough, this year we've been able to do that pretty much every time out. So it's been a special season so far. Great group of guys to be around. They make come to the Yard fun, especially all those young guys in there and keeping you loose. And I feel like you got a bunch of more sons in there than you do teammates. But it's a fun group to be around. A lot of good baseball players. We've played great baseball. And outside of the All-Star game, I'm just looking forward to the second half of these guys. Growing up, you just want to try to play professional baseball. Then once you get into the pros, you want to play in the big leagues. And then for me, it was never really dreamt of being an All-Star, winning the Cy Young. All those were just kind of afterthoughts. And I guess the work that we put in, obviously 19 was a very tough year for me. So to bounce back and now have my 4th consecutive All-Star appearance is pretty special. Just knowing from where I came from after that season. Literally being one of the worst in the league to figure it out and now able to go to my 4th All-Star game is pretty special. And, it's not only me, it's people that helped me get there. Obviously a lot of work behind the scenes with staff and coaches and my family, my wife and kids putting up with it. It's not easy being a big league wife, the amount of travel and stuff we go through. So I appreciate her support and everything she's gone through these last couple of years, but definitely excited.
That's Corbin Burns. And, the year he had in 2019 with Milwaukee, come off a 7-0 year, his first year, 2018, with a 2.61 ERA. Second year, 2019, 1-5 with an 8.82. But then you have the COVID year in 2020, so he only makes a few starts, 12 starts, and goes 4-1. But then comes back, wins the Cy Young in 2021 and has another great year in 2022, 2023, and now 2024 with the Orioles. So quite a turnaround for Corbin Burns, who starts tonight for the Birds and who knows could start the All-Star game a week from last night, next Tuesday night in Texas. Thanks to Ajakun Harris for running the show today. Thanks to Ryan Fuller, hitting coach for the Orioles, for coming on. Thanks to all of you who listen. Tony is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.